I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside, it's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show. Today on the James Altucher Show.
I never knew what being burnt out was. I remember when I was a kid, the other kids in school would be called the burnouts. Then there was the jocks, and then there was people like me, whatever you want to call me. I was called lots of things. Even as an adult, I've always worked very hard, and sometimes I'd get a little drained of energy, but I was never really burnt out. I didn't believe that burnout existed. I thought that was a myth. And somewhat recently, I've had an experience with being burnt out. In fact, I'm still kind of going through it. Probably the only thing that's surviving is the podcast and some other activities. But I really wanted to understand. I didn't feel like depressed. I didn't know what it was, but it was like physically affecting me, preventing me from doing things. And I've tried many odd and interesting things to kind of escape this burnt out feeling. And I had to really discover why I was burnt out. It's only been like the past month or so. It'll definitely make an interesting story at some point. But first, I wanted to understand what this is. So I sought out someone who was an expert, a world-renowned expert on being burnt out. And she tells her story and gives me some advice, and I tell her what's going on with me. Here's the world-renowned expert on burning out, if it's ever happened to you or if you want to avoid it. She also hosts nomoreburnout.org. Natalie Rachel. And by the way, her stories freaked me the hell out. Here she is. Natalie Rachel is an expert on burnout. I'm kind of burnt out. But Natalie, first tell me, what does it mean to be an expert on burnout? Does that mean you get burnt out a lot, or means you know something about it?
It's hopefully the opposite. Hopefully it should mean that I get burnt out less. But I have been burnt out. So that was kind of where my interest in it came from. I'm actually a behavioral economist by training, but my focus had been on decision-making and stress and the effect that stress had cumulatively on our decision-making process and our cognitive health. And that kind of led me to start looking at burnout and what kind of how the brain is affected when we're just chronically overstressed, overworked, and just kind of drained. And that's what it is. It sounds depressing, but actually, there is hope. People do recover from it. And that's what I help people do.
I feel like a lot of people say, oh man, I'm burnt out. but they're
Yeah.
not really burnt out. Like, does
Right.
burnout really mean, and why did you get into the study of it? Like, what does it mean to study it?
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe a good place to start would be like the definition of burnout is the World Health Organization defined it in 2019 as being an occupational hazard. And they defined it as having sort of three defining characteristics. So it's kind of to define it as being different from just stress or exhaustion. So it's being in a state of energy depletion. So you feel very run down, very drained. Secondly, it will be there's a feeling of mental distance and negativity that you're conscious of between yourself and your colleagues and your family. And thirdly, it's reduced professional efficacy. So you're actually getting objectively worse and less able to do your job. So that will be when you're in that state, you're actually already burnt out. But as you say, it's a process, and it's sometimes we might say we're a bit burned out, but actually we can solve that just by resting and kind of taking a break. But true burnout is the kind of cumulative result of all these stresses. So for me, I've been like doing a lot of the kind of theory behind it, like looking at what are the drivers in the workplace that are causing people to be burned out, what's happening at the cultural level, the organizational level, and also the individual level. So that's kind of what most of my research focuses on. But then I'm actually trying to apply that now so that people can use it in practical ways to start walking it back if they feel like they're at risk of getting burned out.
How do you know if you're at risk of it? Like, what's the difference between being at risk and actually having it?
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. And I think it's one of those things that when you notice it, you're probably already quite burned out. But kind of paradoxically, when you're really, really burned out, everything else in your life has kind of fallen into the background. So you're less conscious of how out of balance your life has become. So yeah, so how you know you're at risk, I think one way to think about it is like there are different stages to it. So it's a process. Like at the early stages, you might not actually feel bad at all. You might actually just feel that you're in kind of quite a passionate relationship with your work. You know, you feel infused, you feel engaged with it. The kind of psychological contract between you and your job has maybe become a little bit unbalanced. I mean, I'm talking about a job, it could be something else, but let's just say a job for now. Kind of become a little bit unbalanced. So you're finding that you're starting earlier, you're finishing later, you're maybe letting your other commitments slide in favor of doing more work. You're thinking about work outside of when you've chosen to do it, when you should be thinking about something else, maybe. And so that's kind of the first intimation that things are a little bit unbalanced and that you're kind of becoming overcommitted and the blinkers have started to go on to like the other aspects of your life so that you're just kind of leaning into.
That's not burnt out. That might be, maybe you're suggesting maybe at that point you're overworked. So you're maybe expending energy. The gas tank is running on empty. So you have to do other things to kind of optimize your energy and you're suggesting maybe that might lead to burnout.
Yeah, exactly. So what I would, if you just kind of wanted like a one sentence definition of burnout, I would say it's when you've got nothing in the tank, you've exhausted all your internal resources, but you're pushing on anyway. So it's like your mind and body are saying no, but you're just doing it anyway.
And so what's like the reasons for burnout? Because is it just that you took on too many commitments? Because I feel like people could do that for long periods of time. And
Totally.
I'll tell my story in a second, but like what brings on burnout?
I guess you could split it into like organizational things, like that you might be that your organization's going through a big change that's kind of being forced on you, and you find yourself like having to take on work that either you don't feel equipped to do, or it's just too much, and it's kind of you're forced into a situation that you don't like. So the kind of organizational factors, but then I think there's cultural ones as well. Like people are just burned out by the amount of distraction there is, the amount of pressure on them from different sources, and then kind of personal ones, like if your identity is and your purpose is very caught up with your job, with your role, with achievement, then that can also be a factor in driving your burnout, because you just push on even when everything's telling you to stop.
Yeah, particularly if things aren't going so well, but if you identify your self-worth with the progress of whatever it is you're doing, whether it's a job or some other activity, maybe could that lead to burnout?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's quite interesting. There was a story a couple of years ago, I think, in the Wall Street Journal about, I think it was called something like Beyond the Confetti. And it was about like all these kind of startup founders who were just plagued by this just hellish experiences of burnout because they just kind of, as you say, like they've got their identity completely fully identified with their company, with their role, with their vision.
Right. It's
And
almost like an embarrassment to admit they
yeah,
felt that.
completely. Yeah. And often it's like it's beyond just embarrassment. Like often there's kind of billions of dollars, like of investors' money, and all your employees are looking to you to sort of set the tone for the organization. So like to admit that you're really not coping well at all, it's kind of, yeah, as you say, really embarrassing, but also maybe has real kind of business consequences as well. But I mean, what I would say is that the business consequences of just pushing on regardless until you crash can be even more dire. So
Yeah, and I used to think like what you were saying earlier, burnout's something like, oh, I'm just a little tired of work right now, so I'm going to take a vacation and then I'll be refreshed. But now I realize it's something different than that.
yeah.
It's it's not so easy it's not like just
Mhm.
rest and you're okay.
That's it. And I think like, if you are able to just rest and be okay, that's brilliant. But it probably wasn't burnout. It was probably just ordinary exhaustion, ordinary tiredness. Because there's a definition of burnout from Freudenberger in the 70s, and he said it was like emotional and physical collapse brought on by stress and overwork. So it's that link with stress and overwork that's really crucial. It's not simply you're so tired because you've just done so much. Because generally, if you've delivered a huge project or you've run a marathon or something, then you will be really tired, but you'll also be satisfied, and you'll know that you can just rest and eventually you'll feel better. But with burnout, it's there's no sense of satisfaction. There's no sense that it's ever going to be over. And even when you rest, it's not truly restorative because you just kind of have that compulsion to keep going, and have that sense that you're still not going to be satisfied.
And what's the difference between burnout and like depression?
That's a really good question, and often they do get confused. Often, if burnout's diagnosed at all, it's quite often misdiagnosed as depression. So, I mean, they're linked. Like they've certainly got a lot of overlap in symptoms, like the kind of low mood, the sort of feelings of disassociation, like the tiredness, the body aches. Or a lot of there's a huge overlap, but there's a study actually on I think it's just called the medical perspective on burnout, and they do like saliva cortisol tests, and burnout and depression are distinct. I think I'm trying to think what exactly it is, but it's burnout is more similar chemically to post-traumatic stress disorder. So it's more like a kind of trauma response than a sort of long-term depression response. Which I thought was quite interesting. And I suppose another way a simple way of just passing the difference is burnout is associated with work. So you have, the feelings of helplessness and anxiety are generally oriented towards your work, even if they do kind of spill over into other areas of life. Whereas I guess depression's more generalized.
Yeah, so like I've never been burnt out before in my entire life, and I work pretty hard. Like
Right.
last year when I know because of the pandemic was very hard, and a lot of people got burnt out, or a lot of people lost their jobs, and it was very frustrating. Work wise, I was doing great. Like I upped my podcast from 2 a week to 5 a week. I was doing articles every day. I wrote 2 books. I started a business. I invested in businesses. I moved in general, and that's for 25 years. I'm a hugely productive person, and people always say, "Oh, how are you so productive?" And I'm very efficient with my time. And so I don't think it was a matter for me. And let me fast forward to where I am now. I literally can't do anything. Like I have to be dragged to do a podcast. And that's not totally true. I do all the things I'm responsible for. I keep track of my responsibilities. Most of the time I do like the bare minimum. And I wrote this article in August. I think this was related to getting burnt out. I wrote this article in August called "New York City is Dead Forever. Here's Why." And I got a lot of people liked it, but a lot of people that I knew and was friends with, and people I even, was close to, and other people I admired hated it. And let me know about it. So about
That's tough. Yeah.
30 million people liked it, and about 1 million people let me know how much they hated it and how much they hated me. And it was even like
Oh,
ex-girlfriends writing articles about
oh my
me, and
goodness.
people who used to work for me, like commenting or sharing these articles that were against me. And I was always like really surprised.
Oh,
And I even was fine with all of that. And then sometime, maybe 4 or 5 months later, it was still going on. I've had negative reactions on articles before, but I never had this much. And then there were other things too, like, just in general, I at any given point, I have 7 or 8 things going on because I like to do what I call diversify my dopamine. So if something's
yeah.
not going well, presumably one of the 7 other things will be going well and fine. But gradually everything just shut down. And I think
Right.
it was because I think my brain was telling me you're going to get punished if you stand out anymore. And
Right.
and so somehow I just like shut down, and that was that. And then everybody was saying, "Oh, you're gonna have to get back to normal. You're gonna have to get back to normal." But I don't think there's like a normal. I don't think it's like you're burnt out and then there's normal. I think there's like
Mm,
a new normal, as they say.
I
And
agree.
I don't know what it is. So I don't know.
Mm,
I don't know how to get out of this burnout. Or I've literally tried everything. I've tried like
hmm
huge numbers. I've tried unusual things, like experimental things. I've tried everything.
Okay.
It's like a therapy session.
No, I mean, it's fascinating because everything that you do sounds like you are doing the right things, like the diversification. I mean, if you can certainly, if you can broaden your self concept, that's something that people do find helpful. If they can find that they're getting their nourishment from lots of different sources, like their nourishment to themselves. So that's a good place to start. But I think that maybe, like you say, it is transformative. Like that's something that people don't always realize with burnout. They do just try to bounce back to where they were before without really acknowledging that they're not going to be the same person as they were before. Going through burnout is hugely transformative, and then coming out the other side is as well. And generally people don't stay the same. I mean, it's quite an interesting study, but there's a lady called Dr. Jerry Paleo, who does a lot of the work on linking burnout and post-traumatic stress disorder. And she says that often when people come out, I think it was 90% of the people in the study, in her study, they not only don't go back to the previous employer, they leave the entire industry. Like they can't even stand to be associated with anything that might remind them of what caused their burnout. So sometimes like a complete hard reset might be a good way to approach it. If something's kind of, I mean, if you think of it in terms of like a trauma response where you're just kind of shutting down to protect yourself.
I think that's what it is. I think because most other areas were fine. They had their normal ups and downs for me, but maybe kind of simultaneously things were down or slow across the board. And combined with the fact that this overwhelming response, like it's so unbelievable
Yeah.
some of the responses I got and still get. Here it is. What month it is? March. I wrote this article in August, and today
Mm.
I still have,
My goodness.
people
Mm,
saying things. And
mm,
not to describe the articles, I've done that before
mm.
on this podcast, but people misinterpret it. Everybody gets
Yeah.
everything wrong. And
Mm.
so literally it's like when I sit down to write, for instance, I'm trying to, and sometimes I succeed, but maybe I used to write every day. Maybe I've written 3 articles since November,
Yeah.
and podcasts, we were doing 5 a week. Now,
Mhm.
maybe Jay, how many are we doing? Like 2 or 3?
Yep. Yeah, it's
2?
3. Yep, 2 or 3.
Sometimes
Yep.
3.
Yep.
So like basically that the minimum needed to pay the bills here. And then,
Uh,
and
yeah.
then there's other things, activities I'm involved in, but really I have like it's not like grabbing me like it used to. Like everything,
Mm.
I sort of think a big part of being productive is loving what you do, because then you don't have to spend the energy convincing yourself to do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so with
Yeah.
the burnout, I don't have that energy right now. And so consequently, I do, you know, nothing, or
Mm.
I'll play like online chess all day or something like that. Like, but when I say all day, it'll be like 18 hours in a day.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
here I just wrote a book about being productive, and the book still holds,
Mm.
by the way, but it
Mm.
just doesn't account for if you're totally burnt out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that makes perfect sense. I mean, I think quite a few people maybe could relate to like just that feeling of intense like inhibition, like something has happened that kind of almost unconsciously you just don't feel safe being your full self at the moment. So it's kind of just shut down to kind of keep you safe. And I think that it's interesting. It's like that's come up before actually when I've been speaking to people, that the feeling that they're going to be misinterpreted and then attacked for expressing themselves is a really common trigger actually to just kind of shut down. And one of the things with burnout is it does stop people feeling connected to other people. And it also kind of stops people feeling autonomous at the same time. I think it's a really quite perverse condition, because when you think about like what it is to be human, it's like it's to be someone who's connected to other people, but also kind of autonomous in the sense that you know your own inner voice and your own mind, and you're able to express it, but also kind of connect authentically with other people. And when you're burned out, and I think one of the big features or big cultural drivers of burnout at the moment is the fact that we're kind of isolated, like physically at the moment, and also just kind of psychologically, but we're also bombarded as well. Like we have this instant feedback of other people's opinions, sometimes kind of, as you say, like willfully misinterpreting what you've said. And like I've noticed it so much online, like people are already anticipating what people are going to say in response to them. So they've got this, it's quicker than instant feedback loop from other people, because they've internalized what they're going to get bashed for.
Yeah.
And people aren't even talking about the same thing anymore. It's I know I'm sort of going off on a bit of a tangent, so do just kind of stop me. But one thing that's kind of been really noticeable in like let's just say like about the Harry and Meghan and Oprah fights that people have been having online. People are so sure that they know what happened when we don't. None of us was there. But also they don't even agree on what's been reported, like what we're even talking about, what the situation is that's even under discussion. And yet they're kind of really going viciously at each other, like in a way that you never would in person, surely. But it's draining. It's incredibly draining to people. And I think that one of the responses people have is to just withdraw, either completely put on almost like a kind of fake persona, which is hugely alienating, or just pull out altogether. And the statistics on like how much time people spend online and the effect it has on their mental health and their well-being is pretty clear. It's a almost perfect negative relationship. It's not a healthy environment to spend a lot of time.
Yeah. So what can you do about it? And like what you said earlier, like I'm really not so much an angry person or an irritable person, and I really enjoy all the things I do. But lately, because of this, I've been a little more irritable, perhaps because there's all this pressure to be back to normal. And it's just every day I think I'm gonna get over it, and then by midday or even by morning, I'm just not. And I've never in 25 years, past 25 years, I've worked 7 days a week. I love what I'm doing. Usually I'm super productive, and I've never experienced this before, but maybe because literally a million people took the time out to hate me. And I'm not complaining about it. Like I like to write, and I don't write unless I think I'm saying something interesting. And sometimes that makes it controversial and people argue, but this was above and beyond anything I've ever experienced.
Yeah.
And I literally, starting around mid-November, early December, it was gradual, but I just totally shut down. And then by January, February, people started to notice. So like people wrote, how come you're not posting on different social media? How come you're not writing as many articles? And that, I felt bad. But it's not that I don't know. I feel weird. I feel like there's some stigma associated with all of this because I'm supposed to be like super productive all the time. And I'm just, I'm not being not productive because I don't want to be. It's just, this is happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what should I do?
What should you do? I think the first step is to kind of maybe let go of that expectation that you've got to get back to exactly how you were before as soon as possible. I mean, maybe you don't need to be the same as you were before. Maybe you can be, someone different, and just kind of and integrate this experience into what you do going forward. I mean, I'm just sort of, one of the things I just drawing on what other people have said to me in the past is like, in the kind of pressure to get back to how they were before, they skip almost like a kind of mourning process or like a grieving process, just that sort of acknowledges that something traumatic and disturbing happened to them. And the person that they were, and the things they were going to do, and the things they were looking forward to, they've lost them, even if it's just kind of temporarily, and just kind of give yourself a moment to feel sad about that if you want to, or kind of feel angry about it.
But how do you mourn that?
It is tough. I mean, what I would probably do is acknowledge it, maybe try and like articulate what it is that you feel you've lost, and sort of not necessarily quantify it, but just kind of make it real, like, and without any judgment. Like, you're not, because sometimes people feel guilty about sort of talking about what they've lost when they think, oh, there's people who've lost so much more, and sort of beat themselves up about it. But I think it's fair to, to feel sad about it. And I think one of the things when people have been either burnt out by work or by a sort of nasty experience, possibly like you had, is the sense of injustice, like the fact that, possibly something's happened to you that wasn't entirely your fault. I mean, maybe it's kind of something that you did initiated it or something, but if it's been willfully misinterpreted by people and sort of blown out of proportion, then I think that like having a trauma response to it is understandable, because it's a shock when you put yourself out there and you're vulnerable, and then it kind of gets completely out of proportion, smashed back in your face. It's that hurts. So I would certainly take a bit of time to sit with the grief and the anger about that, and then from there just start to get curious again about what does really motivate you and what you want to do. That's something that, and do feel free to just kind of stop me if I'm waffling. But
no, please.
Sure. So people often, like, one of the things I think that people who suffer from burnout, it comes as a bit of a surprise to them, is that they feel quite like they spend a lot of time. They feel like they spend a lot of time thinking about themselves, and people might even say that they were quite self-absorbed. But it's not coming from a place of curiosity. Like, if it's I think a lot of the influence, people say, like, millennials, and I'm a millennial, but say it's quite a narcissistic culture, and narcissists are kind of self-obsessed and so on. But self-obsession is very different to being curious about yourself, as in just really looking to get to know yourself without any judgment, without trying to manage other people's expectations of you, without any sort of preconceptions about what it's good to want, what it's good to be like, what you ought to be doing, how you ought to be perceived, and just kind of let that go, and just really spend that time being curious about yourself, because people don't know themselves very well. One of the things I found quite interesting is even what people think is going to make them feel good. Whenever the psychologists do these kind of experience monitoring experiments, all the things that we think of as being like harmless fun, like just watching TV, eating chocolate, whatever, people actually find them mildly depressing. Like, when they report in the moment how they're feeling, there's like a teeny bit of relief, but then you're actually back to feeling slightly worse than you did before. You feel less motivated, less confident, less engaged. And I just think that's what's sad, but it's also fascinating how we don't really know ourselves that well at all.
Oh my gosh, I love these clothes. Mizzen and Main, that's Mizzen and Main. It really is the most comfortable work clothes. Travel clothes. I had to travel this whole week. I'm traveling for a week and a half, and I just took Mizzen and Main clothes with me. Close out 2023 in style with comfortable, breathable, packable, and machine washable pieces from Mizzen and Main. As you wrap up your year-end goals, enjoy a Mizzen and Main dress shirt that you can wear confidently. I like that they've very, very just nice, solid colors. I don't really like to get all fancy in patterns and everything, although they do have some pattern shirts, but very comfortable clothes, stretchable pants. It's just super comfortable, but they look professional, and you can wear them casually or professionally. I like some of their flannel shirts or untuck shirts. I love untuck. I never tuck in. So again, whether you're shopping for a special someone or giving yourself the gift you really want, I just buy myself gifts. Mizzen and Main is the perfect gift for any guy who works, travels, and or cares about looking and feeling great. As you could tell by my many photos across the internet, I care about looking fantastic. I'm practically a model. And let's be honest, every guy loves to look great. So again, shop now at mizzenandmain.com and save 20% when you spend $130 or more using promo code James. That's promo code James at Mizzen and Main, Mizzen and Main.com. You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership,
It's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get 2 memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply.
I feel like there's 2 types of activities that people think are going to make them happy, other than socializing and meeting new people. So these are just in terms of like activities. So things like TV, where you enjoy watching shows, you relax, and you think that's going to make you happy. And then the other activity is when you're doing something you love. Like, let's say you love playing tennis and you play tennis, or you love, I don't know, you love being an accountant. So you go to your work as an accountant. And the latter category, they're not always pleasant because they're hard. And so like if you want to be a tennis player, you're going to lose some games and that's not pleasant. Whereas TV is always sort of this mindless thing, and maybe it's not as happy inducing as people think. Whereas hard activities are not really meant to be happy. They're meant to be, fulfilling and challenging. And those are the types of activities that were, for 25 years, I've been doing and enjoying, and I'm okay with them being difficult and being sometimes extremely difficult. And I don't know why this time over other difficult times, it affected me more.
I think that's a good distinction to make, like what people think of as kind of easy fun and then kind of hard fun. Because it's like, people definitely overestimate how good they're going to feel doing the easy fun stuff. And really, as you say, like normally invigorating is the challenge. And I think that's because we're so absorbed in it. Like we can't be worrying about the future or feeling bad about the past or whatever when we're playing tennis or mountain biking, because if you lose focus, then you're done basically. But so I think that's maybe why so maybe they're not absorbing you like they used to. One concept that I find quite helpful is, I don't know if you read any sort of Buddhist philosophy, but they talk about all these kind of ordinary pleasures as just being changing suffering, that they're not actually a source of pleasure. They're just kind of relief from whatever it was that was manifest suffering before. But if you kind of keep going with it, it will just turn into suffering again. I mean, I suppose chocolate's an obvious example. Like if when you first start, it's delicious. Second square, a little bit less delicious. Third, it's okay. And then, and so on, then you start to feel sick. But
and like take an activity like writing, for instance. So people who are writers, you have to really enjoy writing to write. Like some people write because they feel they should. They need, like, it'll be good on their resume. But to sit in front of a keyboard for thousands of hours is not really a pleasant activity. You have to really love it to do it. And I've loved it. I've written every day since 1990 until this recent period. And same thing, like also I perform a lot of stand-up comedy. I'm a stand-up comedian, and you have to love that because sometimes when you do it, people are angry at you while you're doing it. And so you have to be able to come back, even if you hate it that night, you have to be able to come back the next day and say, boy, I can't wait to get back on stage and do it. But like all of those things that normally drive me to keep on going have like disappeared. And, and again, the one thing I've replaced it with, correctly or incorrectly, and this sounds stupid, is I just play like online chess and try to get better at that. But again, some days I can control myself. Some days it's like 15 hours a day when I should be doing other things. I'm admitting this to everybody in the world right now on my podcast. And again, has nothing to do with when I still try to keep the quality high when I do produce stuff. But I've just been trying to figure this out, whether it's just a time thing or what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think time could be an element of it. Like maybe like you're just kind of putting a lot of pressure on yourself to get back too quickly to how you were before, when maybe rather than kind of focusing on trying to go backwards, maybe just sort of embrace the momentum of going forwards. And even if you're kind of going forwards at a slower pace or in a different way, everything changes. Like everything's kind of impermanent in that sense. So, I would just kind of take one day at a time, but looking forward rather than comparing it to how you were before. Because, things change whether we want them to or not. So I would kind of maybe embrace the changes and look to create, I don't know whether you respond well to having quite a regimented sort of full schedule, or whether you prefer to just kind of go with how you feel in the moment. But it can be quite helpful to try and just look through your schedule and just try and plot out where your energy is at different points sort of during the day, like what you're doing at that time, who you're with, what you're thinking about, time of day, whether you're outside, inside, and just kind of try and get a feel for like what your new rhythms might be.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I haven't really done that. I feel like my new rhythm is to do nothing. So, because again, I've been doing I was so proud of myself this pandemic. Like I did so many great things. And, every now and then I try to do all those things again. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But like you said earlier, a lot of times the person who's burnt out, in this case, me, I feel like I'm faking it so people don't worry that their projects that they're doing with me are going down the tubes, which they're not. I should assure people. But again, I've been doing just sort of bare minimum kind of stuff. Yeah. I mean, what's examples what's the relationship between burnout and post-traumatic stress?
Yeah, I mean, it's a close one actually. Like there's some, they do have a lot of features in common. So like, for example, like they both have like, if it's, let's say you're burnt out by your job, or sort of traumatized by something, then it would be like being exposed to that again leads to like feelings of like hopelessness, fear, the most extreme kind of horror, and just kind of that wish to get away from it and just put some distance between you and the thing. Disturbed sleep, feeling withdrawn, depressed, mood changes. Like you mentioned feeling kind of more irritable, and sort of maybe a bit withdrawn, and just kind of a wish to avoid any associations that are kind of going to bring up that stressor again. And I think one of the reasons they maybe do link up so clearly sometimes is because it feels like when you're kind of in a stressful work situation, it can feel like things are being done to you without your choice. And so it's sort of similar to the kind of trauma response, which is to kind of force apathy and numbness. Because, you're pushing down that kind of natural instinct to fight back and defend yourself. But while you're pushing that down, you're also pushing down all your kind of joy and your excitement and your curiosity. And then you're left with just this kind of flat state. And if you're in that state kind of over a prolonged period of time, obviously that has kind of chemical changes to your body, but also just kind of emotionally, you get into that emotional pattern. Where it's almost like a kind of resistance to what's happening to you, but you've got no choice. So you're just kind of passive resistance as a kind of state of mind. And you end up with this kind of numb, flat sort of feeling. So those are the kind of, I guess, the main links between post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's not really surprising. Like when you hear people talking about work when they've been burned out, they talk about feeling like they're being stalked by their job. And things being kind of forced on them. Like they do use quite traumatic, sort of violent language.
How do you see these people? What's a story where someone gets better and life's great after that?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely happens actually. Like it's a lot of people do say that although it was kind of traumatic, although it was hugely transformative and not something that they would have kind of willingly chosen to happen to them, a lot of people do say it was a defining moment in their life in a positive way, because it forced them to get in touch with their authentic self. It forced them to kind of make these intentional changes to restore themselves to health. And in the process, kind of they ended up getting to know themselves a lot better. They formed closer bonds with people around them because they had to, lean on their support network and really sort of make those links with their true authentic self and other people too. So that's a positive. Often people do change direction a little bit. Often they don't go back to the same job or same career path. They will either incorporate new interests and sort of broaden their interests, or they might change direction altogether. Because one of the things that actually people talk about when they're recovering from burnout is they realize how little of their life before that they'd actually chosen for themselves. It had all just kind of been a series of decisions that were almost made for them, or just kind of path of least resistance type things. And before they really got a chance to reflect, they found themselves in this situation that they really weren't happy with, were just kind of pushing on. So the fact that it came to a crisis where they were kind of forced out of that situation is a chance to reflect and rebuild in a way that's more in line with actually who they are, what they want to prioritize.
I mean, that makes sense, because like I feel like a couple of times in almost the distant past, I've had periods where I've slowed down a little bit, but I'm talking like in the 90s or early O's, I actually was depressed because I had lost some money and blah, blah, blah. And I came up with like a practice of things to do that would kind of keep me healthy and uplifted while I was going through it. But this time seemed somehow worse for some reason, even though it didn't really start as depression or anything like that. And it wasn't really horrible what happened to me. It was like so ongoing and so nasty the entire time. And again, I've experienced that before, but not to this extent. And I'm being a little crybaby. Like some people have real problems. So
no, and that's, like I said, that is something that people say. I mean, don't like then beat yourself up on top of what you're suffering through. It's we've all got our problems, and I don't think it's that some are necessarily worse than others. I mean, everyone's suffering in some way, whether it's openly or secretly, or physically, mentally. Like everyone's got their suffering. So I don't think you should do it down necessarily. I mean, from what you said, it seems to me like you had a really nasty shock, and you're still recovering from it. I mean, and you've kind of pushed through to so that you are productive, like more than a lot of people would. But I think it's terrifying to, I've never had anything like 1 million people all well, maybe after this, but all telling me
how
to
dare
hate
you
me.
help him? What have you ever been like severely burnt out?
Yeah, I mean, in a word, yeah. So it was when I was actually at one point I was doing a teaching and research fellowship, thinking that I wanted to go into a sort of academic career, and started doing a PhD, but actually really didn't want to be doing that. But I'd kind of just set off on this kind of treadmill, and it would be so I thought, such a big disappointment to everyone to kind of get off that treadmill. That I did get very sort of burnt out, and very much sort of identified with that just feeling of being on autopilot, just very kind of numb. I've kind of felt quite isolated because I kind of wasn't able to talk to the people around me and really kind of connect with them authentically. And then I was almost feeling resentful towards them that they didn't just psychically know what was wrong and give me permission to quit this PhD. So that kind of created a barrier. But then, to cut a long story short, basically I ended up getting meningitis and lost my eyesight for a year.
Wow.
And and that sort of gave me a chance to pause, like an enforced pause, obviously.
So wait, you woke up one morning and you were blind?
Well, pretty much. I mean, so it started like I just thought I had flu. I just kind of felt kind of achy and clammy and just kind of run down. And then it kind of fairly rapidly went downhill. And as you say, then I kind of just passed out, woke up, thought I had my eyes closed, but actually couldn't see out of them. So that was traumatic in itself. And that kind of took a long time to sort of integrate that experience.
Could you see a little bit, or was it totally black?
At first, totally black.
Wow.
But then kind of came back just very sort of gradually, but in a weird sort of a way. Like I just kind of felt like I could see things, but it was like looking at a flat postcard. Like it's quite hard to describe, but like I would look out of the window, and if I didn't know intellectually that the ground was a long way down, I would have just walked out the window. Like everything just kind of looked flat. And also, like, I was kind of looking through a little hole, like a kind of letterbox, because my peripheral vision had gone.
It's almost like your brain that processes image, the part of your brain that processes images stopped working, and you had to kind of teach a new part. Your brain had to switch gears to a new part, and it took a while for the new part to learn from the ground up how to see.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that was what was so kind of, in hindsight, quite fascinating about it, was that my brain was fine. My eyes were fine in the sense of like my eyeballs, but the connection had just stopped working. It was like, they when they wrote up what had happened, they just put optic nerve atrophy, which is like the vaguest term, really. It just meant my optic nerve had stopped working. So
you must have been scared to death. Did you think you were blind forever?
Yeah, for a while I did. Yeah. And it took me a long time to kind of sort of come to terms with that, really, kind of to sort of, because for ages I was just sort of saying, oh, I'm ill. I've got, I'm ill and I'm getting better. It's taken a while. But then someone actually said, no, you're not really ill, like you're disabled. And that kind of was like, oh, I hadn't really thought of that until that point. So, and that was then frustrating, because I felt like, oh, well, I've delayed so much I've just spent this year kind of just sitting here waiting for my eyesight to come back, when really I should have been learning Braille. I should have been, I should have been getting all the equipment and stuff. But so that was a kind of, then I kind of took, sorry.
Do you think your immune system and the meningitis and the blindness was also related to the burnout? Like, basically, this is your body telling you, hey, we told you one way and you wouldn't listen to us. So now we're going to get a little harsher.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, to be honest, I mean, and it may just be that, like, that's the story that I've come up with, but it certainly seemed like that. I mean, I was just, everything in me was telling me, no, you don't want to do a PhD. Like, you don't want to be doctor, like whatever, this isn't you at all. But I just kind of kept plodding on. And I was getting so angry and angry with myself, because like, it was like my mind was saying no, my body was saying no, but then just this stupid little voice was saying, yeah, okay, yeah, I'll do that. So I was getting more and more angry with myself, and picking up all kind of coughs and colds, and my skin was bad and my hair was bad. I was just very run down. And then, yeah, as you say, then it just kind of all crashed, like all systems failed, and I ended up catching meningitis. Bacterial meningitis, and that was sort of how it came out. But we were talking before about, can it be a positive thing? I mean, it certainly was, actually. I mean, like, on balance, like at the time it wasn't, but it really gave me an opportunity. When I think about where I'd be now, had I not gone through that, it actually like makes me quite upset, because I think I would be living some kind of quite fake life that I didn't actually want. But it kind of gave me such a second chance, really, to pause, change direction, nurture the relationships that I wanted to nurture.
Around the time that you got sick and you really broke down, so you had to not work because you were ill, a year later or 6 months later, whenever it was, what started to excite you? What started to bring you back to life in terms of professional activities?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was actually kind of learning again, and actually like looking, finding out, getting back into that learning mindset of just being really curious about something that I didn't know much about, which was, I was still kind of doing economics, like sort of behavioral economics, but I got interested in this idea about stress and decision making and all the kind of different factors that feed into basically how stressed people are, including kind of environmental factors. I mean, I won't sort of go bore you with all the kind of ins and outs of it, but like, that was it was actually finding a project that was completely new, where I was a beginner, and really getting stuck into that. I think that was that. And I loved that. Like, I get that real joy of learning came back then. And I could see how it could benefit people. I could see how it would help me. It was really kind of intriguing to me how these systems all work together and stuff. So it was finding something that I was really curious about again.
And how did you pursue studying it?
Well, I mean, at first I just kind of had this rather clunky kind of Stephen Hawking voice on my laptop that would just read things out to me. So I just tried to find as many articles as I could and get those read out to me. And then I kind of fortunately had quite a few friends who were still at the university and stuff that I could, say what's the latest research on this and stuff, and kind of start having conversations with them. But it was really, that's one of the things with a PhD. You get your little tiny area just gets smaller and smaller, and you kind of go deeper and deeper into this teeny area, and you can get quite isolated. And if it's not something that you absolutely love, then you lose touch with everything else. So it was nice actually to step out of that and just say, this is an area I'm a complete beginner in. Please teach me and talk to me about it. What should I be reading?
What was it frustrating at all? So you were starting this new thing a little bit later in life than you had hoped. And was there setbacks as you were learning and pursuing career and so on?
Kind of yes and no. I mean, I think if I'd kind of wanted to then sort of start again with an academic career, then yeah, then I would kind of be starting again. And 7 years feels like such a long time. I mean, it's not really in the course of a lifetime, but it feels it at the time. But I sort of decided that because I didn't actually want to do that whole formal sort of academic process of doing a PhD, then you're an associate professor, then you're a professor, and all that. I just kind of thought, well, I'm not really interested in following those rules anymore. So it just kind of takes as long as it takes, and because there was no end goal, like to just get this professorship. It actually doesn't matter if it takes me the rest of my life. I don't really want this to end. I'm quite happy for it to just kind of roll on and take as long as it takes, because I'm just curious about it and enjoying it. But what I ended up doing actually was with a friend starting a training and a training company that kind of worked with like stress and decision making. We did that for a few years, and then we sold that, and so that's kind of enabled me to be able to do a bit of like early stage investing, which I'm interested in, and do try and get this burnout ideas out for people so they can really use them to benefit themselves and things. So I'm actually kind of happy to have a sort of career that's like lots of little different projects going on at a time. Because that, I mean, for some people, they absolutely love the whole academic lifestyle, and they love the, even the rivalries, they enjoy it. But for me, it was just soul destroying. It just like really kind of got me down. So it's been brilliant actually being able to do my own thing through. But again, it's like if someone had said to me, would you like to go blind? Of course I would have said no. but I genuinely don't think it would have happened had I not. Nothing would have pushed me hard enough to get me off that treadmill.
And how were you able to, I mean, obviously when you were sick, it was kind of a way to say, look, I can't do my usual responsibilities. I'm sick. And, I like my usual things. I'm just the speed. And I feel it's not like I'm not good at them right now, but it's like a lot of the descriptions that you say seem to apply to me. And I've been, again, trying to figure out, is there medication for this, or like my normal practice of just being healthy in various ways in my life doesn't really seem to help, because there's so many activities each day that I've been doing for years that I'm kind of like burnt out on all of them a little bit, except for maybe podcasting. Just want to make sure my podcast listeners know I love doing this podcast. But and I learn this is the main way I learn about the outside world now, because I just stay inside my office all day. But yeah, so I think you're right, like asking questions and exploring things, but also it seems like somehow I have to figure out how to give myself a little bit of time, which is difficult.
Yeah.
You have responsibilities, so I have to kind of half and half take time.
Yeah, I can understand that, definitely. I mean, I suppose when you can maybe I don't know, but maybe take some time in between when you're doing your responsibilities, like figure out what you have to do, and maybe I don't know if you could maybe batch those responsibilities together in such a way that you can just focus on those for a couple of days or something, and then maybe take a couple of days time to just do something totally different. I mean, maybe this isn't practical, but some people find it very helpful to just go somewhere completely new and just get lost for a while. That's one way of activating your different parts of your brain. If you've kind of got a bit stuck on the same few thoughts, same few routines, it just kind of go and get lost and try and find your way home again.
What do you do with the people who are maybe frustrated because you're not your normal self? Like, let's say in your case, maybe your parents really wanted you to get that PhD and they were frustrated or upset. What do you start to tell them?
Yeah, and that was kind of one of my worries. And some of it was just completely coming from me. Like some of it was just pure projection of what I thought they were going to react like. Generally, I think that I just had to just take it, really. Like, just kind of, if people were disappointed, just accept that they'll get over it. But I've got to live my own, I've got to live this life. And ultimately they will, if they're people that you have that authentic connection with, like fortunately with I do with my parents, then they will ultimately be happy to see me happy. And this is the thing, it's almost unfair to kind of try to make out that they were forcing me to do it or anything. They had no idea that I was that miserable. They really didn't. So, I think that had I been open with them to begin with, they probably would have supported it anyway. So how to deal with other people, I suppose. I mean, the people that you can be open with, I would say be as open as you can. I've found that people have almost always surprised me for the better, how they've reacted. Like when I've said that I've been struggling or not happy to do something anymore. I mean, I just think it's essential to be clear about what you want to happen. That was something that I kind of used to struggle with quite a lot, actually just being clear and saying no to people. But I think people find it more stressful if you're, doing a bit of a half-baked job for them, like you're sort of resenting doing it, but you're doing it anyway. I think it's probably better in the long run for them and for you to just be unambiguous about what you can and can't do, what is and isn't important to you.
Wow. Well, this has been really great, Natalie. I think you gave me a lot of insights into what's going on with me right now. And what are you working on right now? Like what can I drive people towards? I really appreciate you coming on the podcast on short notice.
No, such a pleasure. So I mean, at the moment, I'm still working with individual clients, but also organizations on anti-burnout strategies, like, sort of how to avoid it, how to walk back from it. But also I'm doing more work now, like we talked about, on like how to modify environments to support healthy cognitive and emotional function. So we all kind of know that like distractions and stressful environments can have a bad effect on our sort of mental function and things. But I'm trying to sort of do the opposite. So like help people create the healthiest environments for themselves.
Like, how can you make a home office? What are best standards for making a home office healthy?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the biggest challenge at the moment. So what I would do is maybe look at like the key elements that you want to get from your day. So I would say you want to have some inspiration, some form of connection, with other people that you have a bond with, that matter to you. Also, you want some of it that you can kind of research, and you can do this digitally. You don't have to do it as in like all different rooms. You can just kind of do this with your digital world. But I think if you've got kind of inspiration, connection, a place you can actually do kind of deep focused work as well, and create your environment to support those different phases of cognitive function, then you'd be pretty close to an ideal day. And there's things you can do. I mean, nature is obviously a really good, not everyone's got that luxury, but if you've got some way of connecting with nature, even if it's just like a window or a tree, that's, that there's a lot of research to show that's incredibly good for you.
Yeah, well, I have to start doing all of that stuff. But thank you so much, Natalie. And where can people find you?
So you can find me where you found me on Twitter. So Natalie Rachel R. And I also have a website, nomoreburnout.org.
nomoreburnout.org. Natalie, thanks so much. Maybe this is not the first time I'm going to ask you on if I get worse. So
well, anytime I'd be more than happy to chat with you, of course. And also I wanted to say as well, because someone who's moved to New York, I actually read your article, and for what it's worth, I thought it was coming from a place of love. I actually didn't take offense to it at all.
Yeah, it did come from a place of love. I grew up there and I've lived there until only a few weeks ago, practically. Right. And I wanted the problems to be solved. And then I don't know why everybody took it the wrong way. I mean, there was some cognitive dissonance that it triggered. And I think a lot of people who hated it didn't even read it. But, it is what it is. It's I can't convince everybody not to feel the way they do. But thank you very much for saying that.
Sure. No, I just feel for you.
Hopefully you get back to New York as soon as possible once things settle down.
That's the plan.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Natalie Rachel, and nomoreburnout.org or Twitter, Natalie Rachel R. Thanks.
Thanks so much, James.
Entresto, sacubitril valsartan tablets, is the #1 heart failure brand prescribed by cardiologists and has helped over 1 million people with heart failure. It's a prescription medicine that treats adults with long-lasting chronic heart failure and works better when the heart cannot pump a normal amount of blood to the body.
Don't take Entresto if pregnant. It can cause harm or death to an unborn baby. Don't take Entresto with an ACE inhibitor or aliskiren, or if you've had angioedema with an ACE or ARB. Don't take with aliskiren or within 36 hours of taking an ACE inhibitor. The most serious side effects are angioedema, low blood pressure, kidney problems, or high blood potassium. Angioedema is swelling of your face, lips, tongue, and throat that may cause death. If it causes difficulty breathing, get emergency help.
Ask your doctor about Entresto. To learn more, visit support.entresto.com or call 833-446-6699. For pricing, visit Entresto.com/cost. If you can't afford your medication, Novartis may be able to help.